4.2 is the second major update of 2025, which is weird because we've had like 5 updates now. This year is different from every other year before it. And even I would say these main updates, excuse me, even these main updates, 4.1 and 4.2, are not really holding their punches in a year when we haven't seen much feature development. Now, when we look at 4.2, y'all are going to see the feature development. It's starting to come through. And we've also talked about just in the last few days, the fact that engineering is going to the experimental branch soon. Now, we've been complaining about this nonstop all year. They haven't been using the ePTU. They keep talking about core gameplay in the monthly reports, but we're really not seeing the features actually come to the players. And finally, they're talking about that. But even besides that, just looking at 4.1 outside of, again, the features, we saw fauna, like a new fauna to fight. Now, that's not a big deal, honestly, and it's not that consequential to the game itself. It's just the type of addition it is. If this had been in the game anytime before, say, 3.18, it would have blown heads. In addition to that, a new mission giver was a big one. Obviously, that came with in-game rewards, which we've never had. We got a couple new factions, all of them receiving missions that fit their storyline and their reputation. We saw the new location from the Hathor locations, or the Hathor facilities. And we saw the maintenance missions coming, which were delayed from 4.0. Now, not all of this was in 4.1. I think the Valakar, Wicklow, I think the mining updates were in 4.1.1. The new location, though, and the in-game rewards, that stuff was in 4.1, and that genuinely is pretty big for even a major update. So now we're looking at 4.2, and we're seeing that the trend continues. Where the heck did it go? Here we go. There is some new interesting stuff going on with this update in terms of missions. Y'all may remember way back, we had this mission at CitizenCon. Some of you remember this fondly because these demos have caused so much annoyance in the Star Citizen community. It's a big reason why people are excited about them not doing CitizenCon this year. There's a lot of sort of this understanding that CitizenCon does take developer time, and it can also lead to them pushing demos that may or may not represent what the game's going to look like over the next year. And it's not like they say it's going to be what the game looks like, but you know, you as a player, you see it, people see it, and then when that doesn't happen within the next year and a half, 2 years, people are like, why'd you lie about that demo? So they stopped doing this, which was a good call on their part. They mostly stopped doing it. And the demos that we see now have a lot more of the things actually coming into the game within the next couple of years. But it's interesting to see this one, which requires this.
We actually take a look outside.
Oh, he's going to talk about this a whole bunch. This one is a mission that took place at Microtech. And a lot of people were wondering, when are we going to get this kind of stealth sort of break into a facility mission?
And we take a look out the side, Glenn, out the window a bit. When you out the window out here. So one other thing, which we're going to get into a little further, is
he's just going to talk about weather.
A ground snowstorm blowing in. Can you look out the window a little bit, Glenn? Look out here.
Really wants him to look at the window.
Come to that and takes into account the humidity.
Now, it'd be nice if you could just steal a security ID card. Like, it's funny that one of the problems they've had with this so far, and you can see this on the patch notes here, Faro Data Center, this is the location we're talking about for this mission, location, FPS, AI, and mission polish. Loadout scanners now require an alive actor to pass the unlock requirements. So, like, people were basically just taking the jacket that you need to get through this area and having it on them to get through the security checkpoint instead of having to wear it as a disguise, which is a side effect of having to have a disguise. It's interesting that it wasn't just like, oh, you need an ID card, but no, you cannot drag that dead body with the lab coat through it. Although I think that Mr. Kraken discovered that you still can.
Yes. The wind, temperature.
Yes,
right?
all of that.
And it is dynamic, so it's set up, so not going to have, we've got a couple of elements still to come on the fully dynamic planetary weather, which would be volumetric planetary crowds and volumetric ground fog. We have a large amount of the pieces in place for our weather sims, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but let's carry on with our...
Yeah, this was like when they were introducing weather for the very first time. Not even the weather that we know now before 4.2.
Data center to try and steal the algorithm.
So I'm guessing that these missions still won't be like this, because like, what's your disguise going to get you past these people? I don't know.
In the demo, or basically in the mission briefing, that you're looking for server number 5. So we'll be looking around and getting closer and working our way over there.
So I'm sure it doesn't escape anybody that this is a demo that's like becoming a reality now. 5 years later, 6 years later, this new location, I believe they're going to add them to both Stanton and Pyro, but at least right now, they're only adding them to Pyro in the Evocati. Who knows how this progresses as we go through PTU. Nothing that we're going to read about or talk about here is set in stone. It could all change. A couple other pieces of information regarding this update so far is that they are sticking a 600 player cap with 10 servers. And mainly the focus is on this location. It's part 1 of a new event. Partial opening of content, including a new data center location. We do have more information based on leaks about those data centers and what they could include. I won't get too much into that. Obviously, there's some bug fixes going on. And then we've got some different changes to ships coming up, some of which don't have people very happy. So the Starlancer TAC is getting an updated hydrogen tank to 48 SCU, but the quantum tank is getting dropped to 3.35. Now, people aren't happy about this because it was sold as a long-distance deep space patrol ship. So we'll see if they end up changing it around again, but news for you in that if you're interested in that ship. They've also got reduced light range on ramp and drop door projectors. Those are just little warning signs that shine down. They've increased the Idris series capacitor ammunition and turret rotation speeds while adding rotation acceleration and deceleration times. And they've increased hangar door and ramp health on the Idris Polaris and 890 jump. How about on everything else? It's so funny when you damage your ramp and then you just have to fly around everywhere with it sticking down like a nerd. All right, got some other notes somewhere. So beyond what we just talked about, some other stuff that we already know is coming in this patch includes the... Actually, I'm sorry, we don't know. We suspect is coming in this patch. Is the Valacar, the big Valacar, big old big boy. My friend Fred, the one that you guys all saw in this during this procedural Planet Tech demo that Chris Roberts sadly kind of phrased as a gameplay demo and got everyone confused. But this is like the poster child of Star Citizen's feature creep and like undelivery. This is what people point to when they're like, yeah, this is they just haven't delivered on any of the things they talk about at these Citizen Cons. Sandworm was #1 on that spot, and just like with that infiltration thing, stealing stuff, it's finally starting to be talked about. I don't know if it'll be in 4.2. Maybe it's 4.2.1. Maybe it's 4.3. But it is starting to show up at least in files, and we know that they've been working at this quite a bit. The actual gameplay that it's supposed to provide to people is something we've seen before. You may not have seen it because you weren't watching CitizenCon last year, but I'll give you a quick look at kind of what their plans are for this. I don't think I've ever noticed that. Wait, what? That's funny. Whee! Okay, so this is the Apex Valacar, and they're not just gonna stop with this. I mean, this isn't just about an enemy to fight. This is going to have crafting implications. There's going to be things that you're supposed to get, obviously, to turn into places like Wicklow or use to build stuff on your own at some point. They're also building the small ones, which we've already faced. But I believe... So yeah, so this is the juvenile we've been fighting. The adult is a slightly bigger one, 15 meters, attacks when its children are threatened, these being the children. Apex is the largest living thing in the verse so far. This is, I'm not really sure which, they'll probably drop them in waves, right? So the next one we'll probably see is the adult, maybe in 4.2, and then maybe we see the Apex in 4.3, and that's how they're planning on doing it. I'm not sure, but we are seeing these start to show up in the files, and you can see that it doesn't end here. They have a lot of plans for expanding these past. We see radiation is going to be starting to affect animals and aliens and starting to create new versions of them. But also there will be a couple different ones that, you know, just show up in different areas. So here you a second just to see kind of what their plans are for fauna.
To their loot and appearance. However, we want to go further with what variants can be. For example, what if the Valacar evolved and grew in a swamp environment instead of a desert planet? Or if a Valacar never made it to the surface and only lived in drowned caves? These are the kind of questions that make sci-fi one of the best mediums. And I can hear the questions already. What does an adult cave Valacar look like? What does an apex quasi-grazer look like? Well, it's these questions that get everyone excited that works on creatures to give you a glimpse into the big picture. All of these variances and differences and new creatures make up what we call our fauna matrix. The fauna matrix is basically our creature encyclopedia. So these concepts should show you that we want to get more weird and wonderful with our creatures. We've started off with more traditional animal references like dogs and birds and cows. But now we're in a position to create the things that we love about sci-fi, which is the weird and the unknown. So looking at where we're going, all of our creatures have been defined for the road to 1.0. We've ensured we've got a rich, diverse, distinct roster of creatures to make each of our planets feel special.
I think it's worth taking a minute to acknowledge that if we did hear this in previous years, nobody would have expected to see these things delivered within the next year. Fauna is like one of those things where if I had seen it, say, in CitizenCon 22 or 23, I would have been like, okay, maybe we'll see like one type of fauna come in just to sort of start us off on this whole thing. But I'm actually, I'm happy with how quickly they've moved through this and really started to make fauna be an actual normal part of the game, not just in that, oh, you ran into a fauna in the forest and you can kill it, and then you kill it and you walk away. It's like they have resources associated with them. You can find them in certain places. They've been hooked into missions. They're getting affected by other aspects of the game like radiation. It feels way more focused on game than just Star Citizen game, which we've had since 3.0. But that kind of it's in line with the trend we've been seeing. Now, here is, just to get a little bit of hype, this is like the rest of the animals that they're working on. And I think they've talked about a couple of these in the monthly reports. I am not sure which one we might be getting. We know the Copion. We know the Maroc. We've already got that. The Quasi-Grazer. And then the Valacar, which we're seeing now. So, after that, we've seen this, I believe. I think this was in an IS Star Citizen Live recently, so I think this might be the next thing we're getting, but I'm not sure. I think this is another worm type. This looks like a variant of the Boreal Stalker. Another worm type. Another Got some whales in here, is another worm type. This is the xylopod, I believe, cyphopod, whatever it's called. So there's like a few things in here we can recognize that I think we'll be seeing soon, but that's just the Valacar that they're working on right now. The other thing that we kind of are expecting to see in this patch, and has basically been confirmed by Jared, was the combat mech, which we can see here in the Star Lancer trailer. Which is why they put them here. These are definitely coming next month. Like there's no way these aren't coming. This is an ad for these before they finally get here. And plus, Jared basically told us. So there's that. Also expected 4.2. Lightning and weather is another thing that we're starting to see added in, and some people aren't happy about the idea that the lightning can knock you out of the sky, but to be quite honest, I don't think that's how it's going to work. I think, like, Evocati be Evocati, and even when they first get it into the live game, it's probably not going to actually function how it looks. But let me show you, I mean, we've watched this plenty of times. There's always somebody who's checking this out for the first time, so let me give you a look at what their plans are for this weather. And I'm not going to show you what's in the actual patch. That's NDA'd. At least in terms of visuals.
Here, and responding to the weather, the system is changing the world around us. We can see puddles being formed dynamically in the dirt, properly responding to light, reflections, and rain droplets, making it getting really ominous and loud in here. I can feel the danger. I think we should let this play out in the game.
Conditions are deteriorating. Severe items. We need to leave now. Get back here. I'm getting out of this suit now. Powering up, flying out. We'll need to switch to IFR. See you on the other side.
So they've had weather effects before. They have not had rain though, and they don't have dynamic wind. The wind is in the game, but it doesn't have, I don't think it's very dynamic. It's not rolling with clouds. So what they're working on right now is the actual dynamicism of weather and its effect on ships and its surroundings. It's kind of funny this is coming out. I just released a video this morning. Appreciate all of you if you watched it. YouTube's hurting us. And it actually mentions how ground vehicles need more reason to exist, and weather would be a big part of that. And then weather is literally coming into the game the next month. So that will definitely help. I think both this, the weather, and also refocusing on the larger scale caves that they started making for vehicles, I think, will make ground vehicles matter so much more. Add some diversity to the game. So this is basically, from what I've seen, how it plays out so far in 4.2. I haven't gotten to go in Evo yet. I'll be doing that today and tomorrow. See, that would be so funny. Like, could you imagine the actual, this is why I know this is an exaggeration. Could you imagine the actual possibilities of your ship just getting struck and straight up just deaded? I can see distortion damage, right? I can see temporarily disabling your ship. Or maybe if you're on like the last possible legs that you have, it damages your ship to the point where you can't fly. But could you imagine having just like a perfectly fine ship, just like scooting through a cloud and suddenly you can't fly anymore? That would suck. That would suck. I'm hoping that that is the case in some planets. Like there are some planets where it's just like, no, do not fly through those clouds unless you got like a Carrack or a Terrapin. But for your average storm, that would just be funny. I would just laugh at that. I don't even think that strike hit him, actually. Yeah, I don't think that hits him. It basically just arcs in his direction, because I'm pretty sure if it hit him, it wouldn't continue going back into the air again. It's generally not how electricity works. Oh, this is super scripted. This whole thing's scripted. This is like, yeah, absolutely. Ooh, like the kinds of storms they can make in gas giants. Y'all want to know what's really cool about that? Take that thought of a gas giant storm, and then hold on, I think I got some footage for this. Throw in something they were working on a long time ago that they never really fully did. Here it is, atmospheric damage. Let me rename that so that I can find it the next time I'm looking for it. That's really dumb of me. So this is a clip from a long time ago, but it is showing off how they wanted to make it so that as you went through pressure gradients, you would be slowly but surely experiencing more pressure on yourself, your body, your head, your ship, whatever. Imagine dealing with this and then dealing with like lightning and not being able to see and all that kind of stuff. All because there's like a really, really lucrative hydrogen mining facility low in the atmosphere of a gas giant. Toes. I'm just thinking of Halo 2 now. Radiation gameplay, my friends. Y'all know what radiation gameplay is? It's where you drink irradiated water and see how long each person can last. Or we could go back to CitizenCon 2023 and I can show you what it actually is supposed to look like. Radiation gameplay is like a kind of, I think it makes a ton of sense for a space game where you're, I'm assuming, dealing with a bunch of components that can leak radiation when they take damage. I think radiation makes, it probably is something that had to wait for engineering, because engineering, when components get damaged, at least quantum drives, probably will irradiate you. But it is also something they're working on for just general area effects. They're working on it for specific items to be irradiated. So like if you are within the range of an item, or you can see it, then it will hit you, as opposed to being around the wall, versus water versus air kind of thing. Or not air, but atmosphere, I guess. The other thing that they're going to be doing is spawning missions so that you need to go and find irradiated resources. Sometimes those might be plants, but also it sounds like they have fauna that will be getting affected from this atmospheric effect, and that will kind of change who wants the stuff that you're getting. It'll also change your ability to craft stuff from them in sometime in the future, but at least for now, it's just kind of something on a list somebody wants. It's not going to be a big deal, but it does show the direction they're going in with status effects and all that kind of stuff. Here's a little bit of a talk and explanation about how this gameplay will work long term.
Hazard. Now you saw this yesterday in the UI demo. I lost my phone. Bone, can you press the button? That's it. Okay, radiation. Right, so radiation, for that, it's a new addition to this active status system. And we need to look at the bottom left here. So in the middle, you got the amount of radiation that being pushed on your body. If you have a directional source, it's based on your body surface and your distance to that source. So by going behind the cover here, I can completely cut off all the radiation. So I can use that. And then on the left, we have an icon that has a shield around it. Now, that shield works in two ways. Right? First of all, it comes from your outfit, so depending on what you're wearing, you're going to have a better or less accurate shield, right? It has a threshold. As long as your radiation doesn't exceed the threshold, the shield will hold true. It'll scrub all the radiation off, and you can stay there as long as you like. But as the shield starts peeling off, when the radiation gets higher, the shield will peel off. And the radiation sickness kicks in right at the end of the video here. And my health just deteriorates super, super quick. So yeah, that's not great. Okay, so we're going to see some more radiation in the next section. So I would like to welcome Inesh up on the stage. Thank you very much, everyone.
So not a super complicated process. Radiation gameplay is something that will occur naturally in the game. It'll also occur during like maintenance missions and stuff like that where you have to repair. So that's something else that we're looking at for 4.2. It's quite a bit going on here. New armor. Basically, this is just armor that's meant to also come in with radiation. As they bring in new status effects, they also bring things in that will coordinate with those status effects. What I'm really interested in seeing, though, is because we have all of this Star Wars stuff that they're talking about wanting to do, which has the custom stats, right, is not how it's going to look or anything, but the idea behind them is they have custom stats. I'm wondering when they're going to go back through all of the armors and rebalance them to take into account everything that they're bringing in. Because right now we don't have any active scans or EVA mobility or stealth or basically we just have protection and space to store stuff as our options for armor in the game. There's a couple armors that are specialized, but I do think that each armor is going to have specific stats for different types of things. Like I don't think we're not going to find any combat armor that has no radiation resistance, right? You're just going to have the Sterling armor, which they're bringing in, as they call it, that has more radiation resistance. So I'm looking out to see when they start doing that, because that's when we really start to get to the point where everyone's going to care about their armor a lot more. And maybe they'll wait until item recovery T1 to do it. The new enemy type I have written down here is just the irradiated enemies that we're seeing from... You guys can talk about leaks during this time, by the way. Once we're past this, we'll be done with it. This is the new enemy we were talking about, basically just having fauna, but instead of being normal, they're glowy and stuff. Whenever I think of irradiated enemies, I think of the Wraiths, I think they're called, from Gears of War 1. Gremlins, or I don't remember. But yeah, irradiated enemies are coming. We got new missions coming to a couple of the mission givers, Vaughn and Eckhart. These are focused on lawful assassinations and eliminate all. It's really just more combat missions, I think, being mixed into the fold on the FPS and ship side and adding a little bit of narrative to them. They're just kind of fleshing out your progression through combat gameplay right now. Notice how a lot of these missions and things are still focused on combat. I don't think that means we're not focusing on combat in the game overall. We can see mining updates coming in. I think we'll see something in refining soon. Engineering's about to go into testing. But in terms of where are we going to focus our 1.0 priorities on making sure that there is like a full progression and just like a vertical slice of Star Citizen 2 experience, looking more and more like they're thinking that's combat. So I think we'll keep on seeing these storylines, missions, and little additions like voice lines and things like that going into a lot more of this combat stuff throughout the year. All right, next up, new locations. These are going to be featuring some of the content coming out. We can see here they are actually named Pyro Research Facility, aka Faro Data Center, located in the stormy area where they're bringing in that new weather, right? And it's going to be looking for specific types of contracts. I don't actually know what they do. Those are more detailed leaks than I have for you right now. But basically, this is going to be something else that draws you into another location somewhere else in the game. Just remember, much like the past activity with the Hathor locations and stuff, these are not just like some time-limited thing that are meant to draw people here for now and never again. They will make the locations more popular in 4.2. But the whole goal here is to keep on fleshing out location after location after location so that when we're actually playing this game, we have things to do. Like, this isn't necessarily for us. It's for the thousands of people that'll see this after us all at the same time. So there's going to be some interesting things associated here. Obviously, the getting that disguise we talked about earlier and sneaking into this place is going to be a thing with the loadout scanners, FPS AI. Just in general, it's clearly going to be something that's, again, combat focused, and I know that's going to rub people the wrong way. Honestly, for me, I love FPS combat, but I also would like to see more logistics focused kind of stuff going on. A little bit more cargo stuff. But like I said before, this is really about getting that vertical slice of a Star Citizen profession up to a standard, and it looks like that's going to be combat. So expect more of this, but also we got 3 redacted items here, and I'm sure there will be some other stuff in 4.2 point whatever that are also focused on things like mining or salvage or any of those other things. Speaking of which, as I've mentioned multiple times, engineering going into testing. This was basically, I don't want to say confirmed at the Con 42 thing that we covered on this very channel just a couple days ago, but it's heavily, heavily implied and hinted at, and I think we've been given the expectation that it should be in some form of testing in the next, I want to say 2 months. Could be next month, could be with 4.2. We don't really know how they're going to drop their experimental branches. We don't know if they're going to do them right on the day and then cut them off or just leave it open. We don't know. So I won't give you any specific dates, but it sounds like engineering is indeed coming to ships in the PU, or at least in the EPTU, in a pretty big way sometime soon. And for those who don't know what engineering is going to be exactly, I think the most recent thing they've said about it was towards the end of last year, and I can let them talk a little bit about it. It has changed a little bit throughout the years. I don't think they're really talking too much about tuning anymore, especially with these flight blades. I'm not sure what their plans are for that. But at least in terms of ship management and mechanic work, we have a pretty good idea of where that's going.
So we say that the resource network is a system that allows all the items and components that are part of the ship to talk to each other.
Every ground vehicle, every base, everything that runs in Star Citizen with resources.
Fundamentally, Resource Network is a replacement for the pipe system we had in the past that you may have heard about.
We chose a similar system, basically doing most of what we are doing right now with the resource network, but in a way that was not as scalable as what we intend to do.
Landing complete.
So right now we just have one type of hydrogen fuel, but if we want to extend that in the future to having like multiple types that have some specific benefits on the thrusters, it's very easy now to add that resource. It's just a data setup.
See, now that's where some people get a little worried, myself included, about components being on the store, because they talk about, is the volume low? Because they talk about how, like, this is how you're going to get your ship kind of into a better place. And then they're like, well.
The underlying technology for the system to work and engineering is the gameplay we intend to have on top of this technology so that players may experience it.
Your ship flies because, the thrusters get fuel, the power plants output power that the weapons and the sails and also the thrusters use. Engineering is all about both maximizing the use you get out of the resource network and also getting the resource network itself going so that you're not dead in the water.
It's all things that players will be able to interact with. They will have to dedicate roles in their ships so that crew members are assigned to fixing those issues, and they can encounter more dynamic situations that will not happen in the previous systems.
I think part of the problem that CIG has with this is, I guess, the same problem that plagues most of the game, but it's all being presented from the perspective of combat. And so people see this and they see freaking ships on fire and people running around and you getting shot and red lights and like all this panic mode. And you're kind of like, well, I mean, I guess over here it's a little bit less intense, But so much of
health
this is
pool
just
of
like,
the bespoke
what's
ship,
going on with your health? What's going on with your armor?
hardware, the biggest
You're
change.
running away to try and fix things. And like, this is exciting, right? It's the easiest way to show this sort of gameplay. But
the previous episodes, it's
It's scaring the
management
out of
is
people.
also a good way to counter fire.
the engineering, the way they present it, just is scaring people.
Another aspect the players have to counter or react to is misfires on components.
Misfires are something that is already in the game in some form. Thruster charges, seal generator failure, stuff like that. Or yes,
See, like, you missed that, right? Misfires are in the game. We already have them. When your ship is like flying weird, or when it gets a torque imbalance or something, sometimes that's a misfire. And it doesn't really ruin the game. You just kind of have to go back and find somewhere to repair that. But imagine if you didn't. Imagine if you could just jump out of your ship and repair it yourself, and then your ship flies well. But that's not how they're presenting engineering. They're presenting it as, oh, you got shot, you're in combat, you have misfires, now you got to fix it. But like, this gives us more freedom. This is opening up our gameplay to do more with our ships rather than restricting us with more things that some of them have already existed.
it's expanding it a bit, and pretty much the idea is that, items that are damaged, that are too hot, or that, for example, are very old and degraded, will start misfiring. In some cases, that will be that it will take some extra damage. In other cases,
Also keep in mind here, he says things that are too hot, very
items that
old.
are damaged, that are too hot, or that, for example, are very old and degraded, will start misfiring. In some cases, that will be that it will take some extra damage. In other cases, it will be that they will stop working for a while. Other times, they will work indefinitely until an engineer comes by and manages to do some repairs.
But a lot of people see this gameplay, again, the way it's presented, and think you're just constantly going to have to be juggling your components randomly bursting on fire while you're just flying from one outpost to another. And like, they're not dumb. They know the game needs to be fun. This isn't going to be something that you're only focused on. This is going to be something that is supposed to complicate the other things you're focused on. So I wouldn't expect this to be overbearing. It might be at first when they first release it, depending on the ship and how they balance it and all that kind of stuff. I genuinely think, though, that this is going to give players more to be happy about than annoyed about when it does happen.
Critical failure then will cause the entire ship to explode.
Oh yeah, that's an important statement, actually.
In a critical reactor failure and taking the ship with them.
There is a chance that if the power plant reaches 0 health, it will run into a critical failure, and that critical failure then will cause the entire ship to explode.
Now, the alternative is something they talked about at Con 42, and they've also been talking about in monthly reports. When you get shot up, your ship won't explode and kill you anymore. They will be having to damage your components, disable you, and then come board you to try and take your stuff or kill you or whatever. It won't always be the case. You can still get blown up, but it's a lot more rare. So engineering is also coming in to be a little bit more of a deterrent against just randomly getting your ship blown up for whatever weird reason that might happen.
The player the time frame to react to that. So either by removing the component and throwing it out of the door and preventing your ship to explode, or even countering it by repairing the component and bringing it up to life again. For the initial release, we have a limited amount of misfires, but we are preparing the system, or we did prepare the system to scale well for the future, so we can introduce multiple misfires, and that leads us to damage penetration.
So damage penetration is a simplified version of what we'll be getting eventually with a more physicalized system, but essentially what it means is that now certain types of weapons can penetrate through the hull of a ship. This is a function of the weapon itself, its penetration values, and also of the armor of the ship, which can be depleted over time.
So if you use ballistics, you have a higher penetration, which allows you to cut through the armor more deeply and touch the components inside the ship directly. As opposed to this, you also have energy weapons, which will be more effective at melting down the armor.
The goal here is that you first need to bring down the armor health value to get to the fullest potential of your penetrating weapons. Then you can penetrate the ship and actually damage the components that sit inside the ship and not on the outside of the hull.
So this was another pretty big reveal that we got at Con 42, which is probably going to be coming in with this feature, as at that convention, Torsten did say that engineering will be coming with the first version of ship armor in the game. Now, it won't be the true ship armor that depends on the Maelstrom system. It'll be ship armor that's dependent on data that they are manually putting in. But it is still a really big deal for ships. like the ship armor combined with engineering and components, also combined with they're talking about control surfaces and an update to FPS radar and scanning are all kind of in the flux right now as a possibility of at least being put in testing. That's a real freaking big deal for ships, friends. Like, core gameplay could take a big step up with these additions if they all do come in and they're relatively stable by the end of the year. That combined with all the content we're getting is a good look. But I'm sure there will also be plenty of bad looks peppered throughout, so we'll keep our eyes out. So yeah, this is
obviously there's degrees to this. Larger ballistic
this is
weapons
really like there's a lot to this. And we have multiple videos on Space Tomato 2 and Space Tomato going through it if you want to check them out. But once this does hit testing, we're going to cover it pretty in depth because this is a big part of why I've been excited for
partial resources or are going through a misfire. We have moderate colors, and items that are otherwise fine will have the functional or blue colors.
The biggest change that happened to the engineering UI screen is basically the power management part of it. We moved away completely from slider.
I'm really freaking excited for this. I know people think this is really dumb, but I've always had a fascination with power systems in games. Like, Satisfactory is such an interesting game on its own. And then when you just consider how you need to power things, how you have separate electrical grids, where your power generation is coming from, all of that kind of stuff, it's cool to just balance things and see how the game reacts to you. So for spaceships, I mean, oh, it's going to be freaking sick. Yeah, the power triangle was awful.
Control for every individual item. There is indicator now for fuel. This is not relevant for the initial release, but it will be relevant for the future. Next to it, you see the power plant. The power plant segments gives you an idea of how many power segments you can distribute to the ship items.
And on the right of each of the power bars, you can generally see the temperature bar. If it goes into overheating, the item will stop both consuming or producing, and it will be completely inoperable until it cools down again. So that means that assigning power to your coolers in advance is probably a good idea if you're going into a fight.
All the items on your ship generate heat, so this is where you can see the amount of heat that each item has accumulated, and you can see the amount of coolant that you are producing and whether or not you are also running a deficit. So what you want to do is put as much power as you can into the coolers until your items do not overheat, but do not assign more resources than necessary because you are running a limited pool of resources.
The same applies to the life support generators. So you have to make sure that you produce enough life support resource that the demand is fulfilled in your ship. If your demand isn't fulfilled, it will cause some failures.
Yeah, that's pretty sick. They haven't even talked about how that's going to affect like a mining ship. Like, I would love to see that layout on a mole to understand what it's going to do to when you have all the mining lasers firing. But we got all those new locations. We got the Bit Zero missions, new Volt shotgun, and then we talked about the EPTU. So why don't I wrap this up as Evocati, I guess, and then we'll move on to the roadmap roundup.